But here's what I think. Somehow this country went wrong. In 1910, I've narrowed it down to a specific dude. It has something to do, and think about what I say later, not now. It has something to do with Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson was the first black heavyweight champion of the world. And the heavyweight championship, to this day, is the most prestigious title in sports. But in 1908, only white fighters had that distinction. Not because black fighters weren't good enough, but because no white fighter would give any black person the opportunity to lay their hands on them. And a guy named Tommy Burns became heavyweight champion. And Tommy Burns was an anomaly. He was Canadian. And he said, I am the heavyweight champion of the world. He's Canadian. You know how, faggy they are. He was like, he said, I am not the champion of Canada. I am not the champion of white men. I am the heavyweight champion of the world, and I will defend my championship against all comers. And boy, Jack Johnson got the opportunity to fight for the heavyweight championship of the world, not from an American like he was, but from a Canadian. Now, you think that Americans would root for Jack Johnson because he was an American. No. This nigga was blacker than Wesley Snipes. Tommy Burns was at that time the shortest person to ever be heavyweight champion of the world. And Jack Johnson stepped in the ring and towered above him, and he beat the fuck out of Tommy Burns in Sydney, Australia. And all the white fighters in America were like, you see what we mean? Fighting those goddamn dirty fighting monkeys. Before Tommy Burns, the heavyweight champion, had retired, there was a man named Jim Jeffries. And everyone said Jack Johnson's not the real champion. They said Jim Jeffries is the real champion. And it's a good thing he's not fighting him. He'll beat your black ass, Jack Johnson. So Jack Johnson called out Jim Jeffries. It happened first in London. Jim Jeffries was in a parade in London, and Jack Johnson's black ass stepped out of the crowd. This nigga was dressed to the nines. He was very articulate. He said, I say, old boy, I sure would like to give you a wallop. And Jim Jeffries just looking at him like, the fuck? And then Jim Jeffries was in a parade in Sydney, Australia, and Jack Johnson stepped out of the crowd again. I say, old boy, I sure do want to give you the old one too. Jim Jeffries was looking like, how does this nigga have a passport? Again, this was 1910. The hallmark of Jack Johnson's character was audacity. There's a story about him that's a legend that says that one night he was caught speeding down a country road south of the Mason-Dixon line. And the police pulled Jack Johnson's black ass over. This was 1910. He must have been flying 13, 14 miles an hour. The police stopped him. The police said, it costs $200 for a nigger to speed on our roads down here. Back then, $200 was like getting a $50,000 ticket. This nigga Jack Johnson didn't hesitate. He gave him $400 and said, I'm coming back this way. After months of persistence, Jim Jeffries relented, and Jack Johnson defended his title against Jim Jeffries on the 4th of July. This is where the phrase, the Great White Hope, came from. They were dying to find any white man that could put this nigga in his place. I'll tell you what, on the 4th of July, Jim Jeffries was not the guy. Jack Johnson fucked his ass up. And Jack Johnson did what they call in boxing, carried the fight, which means he could have knocked him out in the early rounds, but he didn't want to die. He wanted to make it look good, but when he got sick of it, because back then it wasn't no like 15-round fights, niggas just fought till they couldn't fight anymore. When Jack Johnson got bored, put him away with a vicious right hook, and you see Jim Jeffries in the footage start to fall, but then the film cuts off because they didn't want any imagery of this nigga knocking out their hope. And on July 5th, all over the United States, there were riots, white riots, where they killed many black people to make sure that the rest of these niggas knew their place. Because Jack Johnson was the first black person to physically confront the color line and win. And here's the punchline. He didn't just leave the arena with his life. Jack Johnson had a very particular proclivity. He left the arena with his life and a white bitch. Let's talk about it. You see, Jack Johnson loved fucking white women. Almost exclusively, he would fuck white women. And man, the audacity of this nigga beating white men up and fucking their bitches. The black boxing world was elated. And every great black fighter celebrated Jack Johnson. And they came to Jack Johnson, they said, Jack, congratulations, can I get a title fight? And Jack Johnson, just like his white predecessors said, well, I don't fight black fighters. I'm in the business of beating up white guys and fucking their bitches. And one after another, they lined up the great white hopes, and Jack Johnson would vanquish them all. In fact, it took an act of Congress to stop him. Congressman named Mann from Illinois came up with an act called the Mann Act. The Mann Act is the law that says it is illegal to take a woman across state lines for the purposes of debauchery. And my line of work, gotta know shit like that. Jack Johnson got tried, prosecuted, convicted of the Mann Act, fled the country, was on the run for years, and it ruined his life. And then finally in 1946, he died in the United States in a car crash. But before he died, and this is one of my favorite quotes that any American ever said, he said, I risked everything for my pleasure. You know, having freedom is one thing. Not having freedom is another thing. But using freedom that you don't have takes an enormous amount of courage, no matter how selfish you are with it. And Jack Johnson is an American riddle that we've got to solve. Not too long ago, but some years ago, I was here in Washington. I was at the MGM. At the National Harbor, and I wasn't performing. I was at a Stevie Wonder show, and Stevie Wonder didn't know I was there. I was on the side stage. I got there late. He was already doing a show, and this was a very special night. It was the night before Aretha Franklin's funeral. And Aretha Franklin was a very special person to me. The first time I ever played Radio City, she gave me a job as her opening act. Mean boss, but great artist. And Steve was on stage killing it. And then in the middle of his set, he started to sing a medley of all the songs that he had ever written for Aretha Franklin. And man, I got to tell you, it was a lot. Huge hits that I didn't even know he wrote. And the crowd was grooving and celebrating her life. And just suddenly, in the middle of it, Stevie broke down crying, put his head down on the piano, and I could hear him sob. And I was drunk. And it hurts a man to hear another man cry. And I didn't even think about it. I was like, I must go to him. And I just walked down on stage. And you know, it was home. Like, when the crowd saw me, they started cheering. But Stevie didn't know it was me. That nigga was looking like that Falcon. And I sat down next to him at the piano and I go, Steve, it's me. And then he smiled real big and we started cracking jokes and singing songs. And then after the show, we were backstage and he asked me, he said, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, I'm gonna fly to Detroit with you. Pay my respects to Miss Franklin. And he said, no. At that time, the senator had just passed away. The late, great John McCain had passed away. And Stevie said, I need you to do me a favor. He said, John McCain is laying in state at the Capitol. He said, I want you to go pay our respects to him. And I said, nigga, I would much rather go to Detroit with you. And then Stevie gave me that look. He just looked like this, like, he didn't even know I was all the way over here, didn't he? So I went. The next day I went to the Capitol. I don't do this for anyone but Stevie Wonder. He can tell me to do anything within reason. The only thing he's told me to do that I won't do is stop smoking. That I won't do yet. But I did it. I waited in line and then I got all the way up to Senator McCain's casket and I was just like, Stevie Wonder sent me. Goodbye, nigga. And I just walked off. But that's what he wanted. I did it.